and I see the Spirit shining in all beings across the gender continuum.
Thank you, Peggy. So this month, I'm inviting all of us to expand our idea of what this thing called God is, this thing called life, which is God is, and to let go of the male-only God out there somewhere concept completely from our consciousness. I know, we've been progressing as individuals and as community on this concept, but I'm asking us to go a quantum level farther with this, and instead to reimagine the divine as an omnipresence that is beyond and inclusive of male and female, masculine and feminine principles. So the term Mother, Father, God would be more appropriate, I think, from this standpoint than Father God only. However, there are those who use the term it, trying to combine the two, masculine and feminine, together. So whatever works for you. This is not a dictate, but this is an invitation to truly expand and move beyond the old paradigm so that we can embrace something that really supports us in our wholeness and in our ability to see each other as whole, perfect, and complete. And it is this consciousness that is really being called for in this time, is to move beyond that idea of separation, seeing people as separate, different, whatever. Yes, we are all unique and in our individualization, and yet we are still of the one source, and we are imbued with that source and all of its characteristics. So yes, there is both the divine masculine and the divine feminine in each of us. And I was reading in the Science of Mind magazine this month, there was a woman who was talking about her father, who was as she was growing up, he was in the military, and he was like the extreme of masculine. And when he was having a lot of challenges later in life, his therapist invited him to do something creative. So he got involved into some sort of, I can't remember whether it was sculpture or some sort of an art, to help bring in some of that feminine energy and to bring him back into balance. And it worked. It worked for him. It helped him become a happier, more balanced person. So this is not just theory. This is actually really practical stuff. It's to learn, women to learn more, to embrace more of the masculine, men to embrace more of the feminine, to balance that out, and also to embody that consciousness of oneness and wholeness. So March is Women's History Month, a perfect time to talk about the divine feminine aspect in all of us. And there is a call, not only in our community, but all across the planet, to bring more of the feminine principle into politics, into economics, into every aspect of life, as a way to restore balance, equality, shared leadership, truly a world that works for everyone, including women. So while New Thought has a long lineage that goes back into the early to mid 1800s, that's when we started. I don't know how many of you know that, with the work of Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who was one of the first ones to proclaim the mind-body connection, that that all of the ailments of the physical body were a result of false beliefs, false thinking, and mostly about the nature of the divine, mostly about that. And so he healed thousands of people of physical ailments that could not be addressed by the allopathic medicine of the day. And from there, once he made that discovery, there were men and women, and I'm going to be focusing on the women this time, who really took that truth that he discovered and disseminated it across the continent of the United States. And actually, it was into England and Europe as well in those days. And it's really a beautiful marriage of Eastern and Western philosophy, too, by the way. So today is International Women's Day. Today is March 8th. Every year is International Women's Day. So I thought it was perfect then that we're going to highlight early turn of the century New Thought female spiritual leaders. And I think once I do, all of you are going to have a new, vibrant concept of who we are as community and the movement that we are part of. So these are women who did extraordinary things between the years of 1848 and 1920. You know, the years before women could even vote or didn't even have rights. And a great example of that was Emma Curtis Hopkins. Candace talked about her in detail last week, if you remember. She taught metaphysics and mysticism to over 50,000 people. That was before they had the internet. Word went out about her all over the country, and people flocked in from all areas of the country to receive training from this woman because she was so steeped in this truth. She had 12 lessons that she offered everyone, and it was in the Chicago area. She ended up ordaining men and women as New Thought ministers. In the in the late 1800s, early 1900s, she was ordaining women as well as men. This was unheard of in the other spiritual traditions. So you can see the leading edge that New Thought has taken from the very beginning. Everybody feeling a little bit more excited about who we are? Okay. So then her efforts, the other thing that she did is she basically said to everybody that she trained, go out and start some spiritual communities. Go out and form churches all over the country. They went out to California. They went to the East Coast. They went to the Midwest. They went to the South. They went everywhere. And there were many women who started these movements. Divine Science was started by women. Unity was started by the Fillmores, both, a husband and wife. So there was a woman involved there. And Ernest Holmes, of course, started our tradition. And so the very cool thing is, this is what really inspires me, is these women went to lectures, they heard, and they went to the training with Emma Curtis Hopkins. They heard this truth. They put it into practice in their own lives. And they received physical healings themselves. And then they were so inspired, they wanted to share it with other people. So that's when they became ordained or whatever, and they went out and started these new communities all over the country. And then, and you know what? I was thinking about this. This is my story. I came into this teaching with a chronic illness that doctors told me could not be healed, that I'd have to take medication the rest of my life. And I've been without symptoms, without anything since right around 2001, I think is when the big shift took place for me. So this has been my passion and my motivation to share this with other people because it happened to me. I'm a living example of how this teaching works. And I applied it. And I'm not going to say it happened instantly because I started in 1990 and it took until 2000 to really heal everything completely. But I was doing all the inner work that was necessary in consciousness to prepare myself for vibrant, radiant health. So here's the cool thing that happened after these women started these communities. They also started other movements for social change. They championed not only spiritual healing alternatives to allopathic medicine, which is what we do, but they went on to champion emancipation of slaves. They went on to champion women's civil rights and voting rights. They went on to champion child labor laws. They were the early progressives in our country. They were the ones who were out there standing for social justice, the women suffragettes. Everybody getting more excited about who we are and what our roots are? Yeah, I mean, it's really a very cool thing. And together, they, along with the men in New Thought, formed this new mental equivalent of what life could be like on planet Earth, what heaven on earth really looked like, with rights and privileges for all people, no matter what their gender or what their age. This was a new, what we call in our teaching, a new mental equivalent, or you could say a new vision. And of course, if you don't have a vision, then there's nothing to pull you forward. There's nothing to motivate you. So this is what they had learned, and we have a powerful spiritual practice in our community called visioning. And if you haven't learned how to do it, please take one of our classes, because this is a way to catch those new mental equivalents from the mind of the divine within us, that helps us to move forward in our lives personally and as a society. So what was operating through these women in partnership with the men in New Thought was a power greater than themselves. That's what was operating through them, and giving birth to not only health and well-being and greater flourishing in their lives, but giving birth to social change. I'd like to read something by Pansy Hawkwing, a Lakota Sioux elder, who spoke to this thing called the feminine power principle. She said, feminine power is the power of inner space. Women are given, she believes, an extra charge by the Great Spirit, the added responsibility of procreation. And it's not only procreation of babies, it's procreation of a new world. Women carry the power to create the instinctual wisdom of inner space and the ability to birth social change. That was some wisdom from a Lakota Sioux elder. She also gave the concept of the spider analogy to describe this new kind of leadership that is masculine, and has this added principle of the feminine. And she said there's the spider that's very heavy and the web that's made of very light material. Yet think about the web, how it supports this very heavy spider. And she sees that as the way in which we lead more effectively, from this supportive way that accomplishes great things. So as writers, teachers, and healers, women empower other women and men to claim their divine birthright of health, self-worth, and freedom. So what is New Thought? Let's do a review of what New Thought is. And I think William James defined it really beautifully. He said, it's the systematic cultivation of healthy mindedness by focusing on higher truth. It really is about optimism. It's about optimism. And the troubles that we see in the world, said Phineas, Parkhurst, Quimby, and I'm thinking about all of this stuff about coronavirus and so on, originates in mind. And we need to keep remembering this, because when we keep thinking it is something outside of consciousness that just is coming to get us, that's when we get into trouble. He said, when we are sick, our mind has been deceived by thoughts of separation and fear. And so his work, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, this one who realized the mind-body connection back in the mid-1800s, is that our work then is in consciousness. It's in mind. It's with our thoughts. And it's about moving away from the idea of a separate God out there and being caught up in fear, And when you think about it, this just makes logical sense. We know this, that fear is the stress response. And what it does is it decreases our immunity. And in fact, the opposite, positive thinking, and this is from the Mayo Clinic, by the way, health benefits from positive thinking, increased lifespan, lower rates of depression, lower levels of stress, greater resistance to the common cold, better psychological and physical well-being, better cardiovascular health and reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease, better coping skills during hardships and times of stress. That's what I'm calling upon today from all of you, and asking all of us to band together as community to embrace these teachings that take us into this space of optimism, healthy mindedness, that transforms not only our consciousness, but you'll see in a few moments the consciousness of the planet. So affirmative prayer is something that we teach, and that's what our new class is all about that's coming up. The power of your word. It's how to use the power of your word to transform your consciousness, which transforms everyone's consciousness ultimately. And it frees us from fear, and it returns us to a state of health. That's what I discovered in my own life through the use of this thing called spiritual mind treatment. So I'm just taking a guess now at what some of these early New Thought women might say when they hear about coronavirus on the and they didn't have TV back then, but if they had been in this day and age. And this is my guess is what would happen. So I'm thinking first of Myrtle Fillmore. I'm just going to do something short on her because I know Reverend Linda's going to go into detail next week on her life. But in 1886, Myrtle Fillmore, who was one of the founders of Unity, learned of her innate potential for divine healing by using mind treatment, which is what we just talked about. And this was her favorite phrase that she contemplated. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. I'm a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Would you repeat that with me? I'm a child of God, and I do not inherit sickness. So what do we inherit? Health, yes. She not only healed completely of tuberculosis back in the days when that was just unheard of, but she went on to live to age 86. That's pretty darn good, don't you think? Elizabeth Town. This woman was amazing. And by the way, all of these women and more are highlighted in a book called Voices of Angels about the early women of New Thought. And you can get it on Kindle. If you want to buy the book, it's like, at this point, I guess because it's out of print, it's like $848. And I passed and I decided to get the Kindle version. So it's obviously a very in-demand book. But it's you can tell it's a big book. It's many pages to it, and it highlights all of these early women. So Elizabeth Town, I think of her as the Louise Hay of 1900 because she was a publisher of a magazine called The Nautilus, and she also had a publishing company, and she published New Thought books. This is back in 1900. And she was also a writer. Oh, she was also the president of International New Thought Alliance in 1924. And so here is what I think her response would be to the coronavirus. She says, fear thoughts pucker the solar plexus. I love these words. Pucker the solar plexus. In other words, restrict it, which is our seat of power, and diseases can take hold. She said, when fear shows up, rise into the ideal God self by pumping yourself full of I am consciousness. Isn't that great? Pumping yourself full of I am consciousness. So she said, identify yourself with God and use the I am. So I am one with all power. I am one with all wisdom. I am one with all love, all peace. whatever it is, all health. And then she said, acknowledge the one power in all you think, say, and do. That means keep it in the forefront of who you are in truth, an individualization of God, a presence of all power, a co-creator of your life, a co-creator of heaven on earth. To keep that at the forefront of your mind as you move throughout your day. That's Elizabeth Town. Nona Brooks. I'm just going to do 3 of the many that are featured in this book. So she's the third one. She was the co-founder of Divine Science. And her response to COVID-19, I believe, is she would teach you about the law of transference. And she said, we are all broadcasting stations. Our thoughts are broadcast or transferred, and we receive broadcasts from other humans. We must therefore refuse the admission of fear thoughts into our consciousness. And so that means when we're watching TV, is refuse to allow the fear thoughts to get into your consciousness. I mean, it's really important that we not receive that kind of broadcast. That we deny its truth. This is not the truth. Instead, be receivers of spiritual truth and broadcast only ideas and thoughts of truth. Be the presence that you are meant to be, in other words. Are you still getting excited about this legacy that we live? And this is just the females. We also have the males too, but I'm featuring the females this time. So here's the thing. This is the call to action, is that we continue the legacy of these early New Thought female leaders and broadcast words of truth wherever we go, words of health, to not allow ourselves get caught up in conversations that promote fear. And so therefore, it's important to remember that what we focus on grows. That's a spiritual principle that we have. And so if we focus on the truth, what's going to happen? We're going to promote health and well-being. So I found online, actually this came through one of my fellow ministers, a tapping script. How many of you are aware of what tapping is? Oh, good. A bunch of you know what that is. Okay. What it is, it's tapping on various points, acupuncture points. And what it does is we will be able to tap away fears, and also tap in the spiritual truth. So if you'd like to do this with me, just follow along with what I do. So the first place we tap is on the side of our hand. And repeat after me. Even though I have this fear of coronavirus, I choose to hold the highest and best vision for myself and for all of humanity. Even though I'm afraid of how I will be affected by the coronavirus, I am choosing to hold the highest and best vision for myself and for all humanity. Even though I'm afraid of how the world will be affected by coronavirus, I am choosing to hold the highest and best vision for myself and all of humanity. I declare for myself and all of humanity perfect health. The I am and the we, I declare for myself and all of humanity that I am and we are in charge of our bodies, in charge of our health, in charge of our minds. I choose to shrug off all fear. And I hold the intention that each person is showing up to declare that they are sovereign over their body, over their life, and over their mindset. We choose to live life fully and not shrink back in hype, fear, and negativity. I receive, I believe, and I am grateful that we now band together and collectively choose our immunity to boost our immunity. And I just realized I haven't been moving around the points. To boost our immunity by being positive and surrounding ourselves with others who are positive. We choose to follow the sage health advice from those providing clarity and not chaos. I choose to educate myself about the truth and will only spread the truth. I hold this intention for myself and all of humanity. That is now our dominant thought. That is now our default position. I delete and repel anything that attempts to derail my own good health and the good health of humanity. Let us live our lives fully every day. I hold this vision for myself and all humanity. This or something better. The best and highest good for all. And so it is.